Hey, welcome everybody to the Tales from the Jar Side live stream. My name's Ken Cousin. So my guest is someone who arguably needs no introduction at all, but I'm going to give him one anyway. This is the inimitable Venkat Subramaniam with an M there, by the way. Oh, Simon's here. That's excellent. Hi, Simon. Good to see you again. Simon's been to several of my live streams, so that's also good news. To give you just a little bit about Venkat, you know what I think I'm going to do? Let's see if I can share out my screen here. So if I do it this way and then hit the present button and pick my screen here. There we are. So this is agiledeveloper.com. That's Venkat's site. Is that readable? What do you think, Venkat?
No, it seems like it. Yep.
Okay, I magnified that. At some point you might want to update this site. I think it kind of looks like it looked like when I first accessed it, 10 years ago, more?
20 years ago.
Yeah. I see you've got your books here, but that can't possibly be all of them, is it?
That's it.
Really? How many books have you written?
Including editions, 15.
Yeah.
But I don't think I have all of them listed in the editions.
That's
though.
right.
Yeah.
Here, let's do it this way. I'll go to the No Fluff site. And last week, Venkat did a webinar, and I point these out because they are free, which is nice. But Venkat did, okay, you got to update that picture. I'm sorry. Did a webinar on what was entitled Idioms for Functional Style Programming. And you can see that anybody can watch the recording whenever they like. Here, let me take that link, and I think I can paste that into the chat here. There we go. And oh, by the way, there's Bill. Oh, I see. It doesn't show. Oh, there it does. There's Bill's little comment there. But I was thinking on this site, is this showing the No Fluff site?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. So let's close that and do it this way. There we go. Now you can see it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So did you put a bio in here?
Maybe so. I'm not sure.
Award-winning, dude. Award-winning author. Yeah. What award is that, by the way?
Well, way back in time, it was a Jolt Productivity Award for the Practice of an Agile Developer.
Yeah, you won a Jolt Award. I remember that on Practices of an Agile Developer. Yeah. I submitted my Making Java Groovy book for that award. I never heard back from them. Yeah, this is pretty thin. Multiple technical books. There's the Productivity Award, right? Yeah, I mean, dude, that's really not enough. We need more than that, but okay. Do you want to give a brief intro to yourself, or you want to say anything about your background at all?
No, just a dude hanging around.
Okay, well, I'll just say this much. Venkat is a good friend. I've known you for, I don't know, 12, 13 years, something like that, maybe closer to 15. I think I met you on the No Fluff tour, but probably back when I was still an attendee, because weren't you one of the first handful of people on the tour at all?
Yeah, I started back in 2001.
Wow.
So 22 years running.
22 years. So that's back when, I mean, how many events did they have in 2001?
I would say three. So I remember Houston, Chicago, and one more I cannot remember now, maybe Dallas.
Dallas, yeah.
Yeah.
This is what I've been suggesting too. I'm glad Simon agrees with me. Who's likely still hoping to have a jug event in Antarctica. I usually say that differently. I usually say that Venkat has enough travel miles in any given year that when he boards the plane, they just hand him the keys, but I always think that when you're going to list your, as Bill says, if you're here, Venkat, right? It's that every time you list your travel schedule for the coming month or whatever, then I always suggest that you do a brief stop off at McMurdo Base in Antarctica because it really wouldn't change that much, right? So, okay, actually, let's start with that. Just out of curiosity, I know that this has been remarkable because you've been home for what, 2 weeks now?
Almost.
Almost 2 whole weeks. That's really
Yeah,
unusual.
it
So,
is. Yeah.
what's the next burst of travel look like?
Oh my gosh. So I'm going to Houston next week just for a
Okay.
short trip, and then the madness starts one more time. So going to Switzerland and coming back for a day, and then going to Norway and Sweden,
Uh-huh.
coming back to Boston, and
Okay.
then on the way back to from Boston, uh, to Davos, Poland, which is in Belgium. I'm sorry, not Poland, but Davos, Belgium, and then Antwerp, and then coming to your neck of the wood. I'll be in Connecticut for 4 or 5 days,
Oh, wow.
and then jumping back again to a trip through Dublin, Romania, and then coming back for a couple of days. Got to Latvia, and I
Latvia.
think going back to Greece, and then coming back to Florida, and then heading back to Norway. So that's kind of what the rest of the year looks like.
That's the fall, right?
Yeah.
So, and what gets me, the part that I really can't understand at all is you do all that in coach, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a small guy.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be helpful, but still, I think you would have enough miles that it wouldn't make any difference there. Um, so, at any rate, Venkat is quite the world traveler, and it was really unusual. I caught you at UberConf back in at the beginning of middle of July, I guess it was,
Yep.
and that's when we got a chance to when you mentioned you're actually going to be home for a couple of weeks. So I figured we'd get a chance to do this. Let's what I like to do with this live stream is I like to find out more about like your history, like what brought you into IT. Were you a career changer? Did you go directly into it? Did what was your path through all this? Maybe it's because I tend to talk to older people because I'm an older person, But what's your path through all of this look like?
So back when I was in school, I'm talking about 11th grade and 12th grade right now.
Okay.
I was really getting excited about mechanical engineering,
Okay.
and
Really?
I was into engineering drawing, and I was a struggling student, and it was really hard to focus on anything.
Huh.
And I was not never gravitated towards studying and theory. One of my aha moments years later, I was in a Oracle event a couple of years ago, and somebody was asking me the question. And then sometimes these things jump out of your mind, things that are in your mind but never you put into words.
Hmm.
And I suddenly realized I love learning, but I really hate studying. Studying was not for me. I was not a
Really?
good student back in time, but I love learning, and I really hate studying. I'm not, if you give me a bunch of stuff and say that's why I don't have any certification. Like if you tell me here's the stuff you need to prepare, I'm like I'm out of here.
Isn't that
So
interesting? Okay.
so
Now this
engineering.
was Houston at the time, did you say?
No, this was back in school.
Yeah. Where were you based at the time?
In India. Yeah.
In India. Okay.
Yeah, and so one of the courses I had to take in 11th grade was called engineering drawing.
Hmm.
So the engineering drawing is where you don't read stuff, but you create stuff. So
Hmm.
you're given a building, or you're given an object, and you're supposed to render it in different dimensions and deal with it. I got really excited about it. So when I went into college, uh, the first year, the way the courses were structured back then, you didn't have to choose your major until your second year, which is lovely
What was
because
what was the school, by the way?
this was the engineering, University of Madras, where I graduated from
So it
for
wasn't
my undergrad.
IIT or anything. It was in my
No, no, yeah,
Okay.
in Madras, yeah.
All right.
So
Sorry.
so I was in my undergrad
Hmm.
first year, and so there was a professor of mechanical engineering who really got excited about my aptitude towards engineering in general, And the story is, we used to take a bus, so it was an hour-long drive from the city to where the campus was.
Oh, wow.
And so this was actually a ritual, which was interesting. I would get into the on the bus, and he would be waiting in the bus for me to get in with a solution to a problem he had given me the previous night. So my job was to solve a problem overnight and show him the solution the next morning. So he would always have a seat next to him, right, reserved for me. I would hop into the bus, sit next to him. For the next hour, we'll debate about the solution. And then when that's done, we'll meet during the day when I have a break and he has a break. We'd discuss the next problem, and complexity of the problems get going up.
Mm,
And eventually he gave me a challenge. He said, "Nobody I know has solved this problem. Let me see if you can solve it."
okay.
Sure enough, I couldn't solve it the first day.
Oh, I was
It
gonna
took
say
me it
this is Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, and yeah.
it took me about 2 days to solve the problem. And at the end of the second day, I went and showed him. He was not in belief. He said, "No, I don't think that's right." And then it took him about 30 minutes to go through and say, "Okay, finally you got it." So
Ah,
it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to be in mechanical engineering at the end of the year.
okay.
So the year rolls down. Hey, you're supposed to choose your major. But then I had an uncle who was a professor of English, and he would come visiting, as my uncle. He would come visit my house, from time to time. And he came to me one day and he said, "I got a little problem for you to solve." And then he gives me a problem. I didn't have computers. I didn't have access to computers. PCs were relatively new back in time. I'm dating myself right now.
Eh,
But he gave me a problem and said, "Solve this problem on a piece of paper." So my algorithm was written on a piece of paper to solve the problem. That was my first exposure to algorithms and data structures without ever programming. So I worked on that problem. He would come back from his trip. He would ask me to show the solution. I would show it to him, and he would throw me another challenge. So I've got two different things going on here. One, the professor who is giving me problems to work on. Here's my uncle giving me algorithms to solve. So end of the year, hey, I need to choose a major. I'm
mm,
sitting there. There's a thing called computer science nobody knows about, and here's a well-established mechanical engineering. I'm like, take computer science. I forgot to tell my parents that I chose a major. So about 3 months goes by, and we were having dinner, and my dad is like, "Oh, by the way, you need to really come up deciding your major, because that needs to be decided this year."
mm.
I'm like, "Oops, that was 3 months ago, and I decided my major." He was not happy hearing that I did, because you're supposed to tell your parents what you do. You need to
Oh,
be involved in the decisions. Like, "Oops, sorry, I forgot that part." So that's how I started into computer science, is getting excited by my uncle to solve these kinds of problems. Of course, the professor was very disappointed that I didn't go into mechanical engineering. My
mm,
my dad was not very happy knowing I'm getting to something called computer science, which nobody knows about.
ah.
What is there a future to it at all? And if everything else is history.
So you went and finished your bachelor's in CS?
So I got a computer engineering
Oh,
rather than computer science. So it may come as a surprise. My field of focus back in time was actually computer architecture.
really?
So not no programming was something I really didn't have any liking for. So it was computer architecture. Probably the closest it came to software was getting into operating systems. And then I came over to Houston and I got into electrical engineering because I really wanted to focus on the computer engineering aspect of things.
So you'd been a hardware guy and figured you'd get more of the EE background.
Right. And things took turn for the worse. When I
Really?
came to Houston and joined electrical engineering, I came in contact with a professor who wanted me to do research on numerical analysis of all things. So he was, this is
Okay.
weird. He is part of electrical engineering doing research on numerical methods. So that was my first research. And I took an algorithm, but of course I had liking for algorithms from back in time,
Right.
not necessarily programming. So I worked on an algorithm with him, and that's when I got excited about uh, going into computer science, which is where I started my PhD eventually. And that was my dissertation was actually in computer architecture. So I had zero interest in software development all through, and so I was well into my computer architecture, and eventually my PhD was in parallel processing, actually.
So you did, wait, your PhD was in what exactly?
Parallel processing.
Parallel processing. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So
Yeah.
you went straight through though. I mean, when you started school, then like what, 8 years later, you had all your degrees?
Yeah, and I kept saying I would not do this, and I
Yeah,
kept going
right.
for it, compulsive.
Yeah, like most academically, people with an academic background are often like that.
But I
So
don't have three PhDs like you do, though. I'm still working on my second and then the third to even come close to your level of accomplishment.
yeah, yeah, here we go. Here we go. Okay, well, we'll come back to all that. But any rate, you did work on parallel processing. Were you working with a parallel machine at the time? Like the
No,
connect something like that?
no, theoretical. It was data structures for parallel computers.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you were really ahead of the curve then.
I wouldn't call it that way, but I was somewhere.
Were you, I mean, one thing I learned in my academic background is that a PhD really is a research degree, that you're training yourself to join a fraternity, which should be more of a sorority too, but it's basically a community of academics who spend their life attracting funding and are begging for money and then doing research. Were you tempted to join a faculty somewhere right away?
Not at all, not at all.
Oh, you
So
were
so
ready to get out.
by the time I got done with my PhD, that's when it took a turn again for a surprise. By the time I finished my PhD, I was well into software development,
Oh,
which is very surprising that it happened. And by then I was sure I didn't want to be an academic, so I left as soon as I finished. I do still teach though. I love the teaching part. So I've been teaching at the University of Houston for about 30 years now, part time. So I started teaching when I was in my PhD,
hmm.
and I continued to teach those courses when I graduated. It's funny how laws and requirements are. I was on a student visa,
Oh, okay.
and when
I
you're on a
wonder.
student visa, you are not allowed to work outside, and but you're allowed to work at the university. And I
Oh,
did something very strange. This is where the strangeness comes in. I remember going into the international students office, and I said, I've got a bit of a peculiar situation. Most time students want to work outside, but I have a job outside, but I want to still teach at the university. Can I do it? And they were like surprised. They said, you can teach at the university anytime you want to because of your student visa. So I started working as a full-time software developer, working whatever 9 to 5, rush back to the university, and I would teach courses at the university in the evening. And so I started doing that, and I've never stopped teaching at the university since then.
let me give a little bit of context then. So, roughly what years are we talking about here? When were you a grad student? When was this early in your career?
I was a grad student between 1990 and 1995.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
more like 94. Yeah,
So, in other words, you were getting out into the job market right before the internet was getting ready to take off.
yep, that's right.
About two to
Yeah,
three
there was no
years.
internet at that time.
No, no, but it was just, you were right there. So, where did you go work for first?
I was actually working for, of all places, Halliburton.
Oh,
wh-
wow.
we did some amazing work back then. One of the projects I joined, which is another story, um, is they were developing a simulation system
Uh,
for modeling refineries.
yeah.
And so we were using object-oriented databases. which don't exist anymore. But
Oh, wow. I remember those vaguely.
so
Yeah.
we were using object databases,
Uh-huh.
and what the system would do is, if you can kind of visualize it, think of this as a CAD system.
Mm.
So you pretty much draw and drop units that appear in a refinery, right? You drop a heat exchanger, you drop a kettle, you drop a reboiler, you connect them,
Uh-huh.
and then you click a button. It runs through a simulation. It tells you what the throughput will be for the input
Oh, okay.
and will allow you to start refining, so to use the word pun intended, the model so that you can deliver the output you intend. And so it was an extremely complex system. And so I was involved in the database modeling aspects of things, and all written in C++ back then with object
That's,
databases.
that was my other
And
question. Yeah.
it was fun times. It was incredible time. Halliburton doesn't have a good connotation when people hear it, but we were part of this organization where we were doing some interesting engineering CAD tools. It was a fantastic experience.
So what
And
were you teaching at the university as well?
I was teaching C++. So I was teaching
Oh,
C++. So that's how I got into software development. So the history is I was a system administrator.
ah,
And so as a system administrator, your job was to install the machines. And Ken, you got to think about this. I don't look this way anymore, but I used to weigh 96 pounds to 104 pounds maximum. So I was this lean guy. If you
yeah.
sneeze in front of me, I'll have a few bones broken. You probably remember those digital computer machines.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Right,
The
right.
monitors were, I
Uh-huh.
don't know, 70 pounds.
Yeah, yeah. Huge
I,
CRTs.
I,
Yeah.
can, I can't lift them being 100 pounds. So my job was to install these machines,
Ah,
install the operating system, and take any upgrades that come necessary. But as you can imagine, you cannot do this during the day because the faculty and the students are using the machines.
right, right.
So, and I was married at the time. So my wife and I would go to campus at 9 p.m. She would literally sleep in the office
Oh my goodness.
while I worked through the night. We would come home together at whatever, 6 or 7 in the morning, only to, get maybe an hour or two of sleep, go back to campus for classes I need to be a student in.
Hmm.
And in the meantime, I got to finish my PhD.
So even
And my professor had given me a list of things you need to do to graduate.
right.
There's no way I'm getting there because I don't have time to do the research. So I went to the department and I said, hey, I don't want to be the system administrator anymore. I want to focus on my research. I want to actually graduate someday and leave.
Yeah.
And the chairman got really angry.
Ooh.
And he said, I'll fire you because we trained you to be a system administrator. And we made you a system administrator because as a PhD student, you're going to be here for a long time. So we wanted somebody who will be here for a long time. So if you don't want to do it, you can leave. I'm not going to support you.
Wow.
So back I was system administrator installing things. And this new language called C++ had just come out. And the department wanted to teach C++. So they sent out an email saying, anyone who wants to teach C++. Ken, I'll be honest about this. I don't know what the word C and plus mean. It didn't matter. So I threw my name into it. I want to teach C++. And a professor said he wants to teach C++. And nobody else volunteered to teach it.
Ah.
So the department looked at this and said, okay, here's a full-time tenured professor
Oh my God.
who wants to teach the course. And here is a guy who wants to run away from being system administrator, who wants to teach a course. And so this was supposed to start in January. And so in November, they said, sorry, Venkat, the professor wants to teach the course. He obviously gets it because he is the faculty tenured.
Right. Right.
You can go off and do what you do. So back I was, doing my stuff. And December 1st, nobody knows why, the professor says, nah, I don't want to teach it. This is 6 weeks before the course is supposed to start, right? So the department is like, oops, we scheduled this course.
Yeah.
Students have registered for it. Now
Right.
we don't have an instructor. Who else can teach it? Oh, what about this guy who put his name onto it? Hey, you're going to teach it. And so December 1st, I came to know I'm going to teach a course on C++ in 6 weeks. So as anybody does, I called my friends and said, hey, what is this thing called C++?
So
And
you didn't go through the chrysalis stage of learning C or anything like that.
no, and programming is not my main area either.
Okay.
So I called my friends and said, what's this kind of thing called C++?
Right.
And a few of them personally called me, and one of them advised, I have a recommendation for you. Go to the chair and sincerely admit you made a mistake because you're on a death march.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not going to survive this.
Hmm.
He said, do you know what inheritance is? I said, I don't think my parents have enough money for it. And he said, do you know what polymorphism is? I'm like, what's that? Is it polymer or something? He's like, no, don't do it. That's the state I was in. And so I said to myself, no, I need to move forward. So I got a couple of books, got a compiler, spent 12 hours coding every
They
single
let you
day.
out of the they let you out of the system admin job,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So coded for 12 hours a day for one entire month. This was my December Christmas break. Come January, I turned myself into an expert on C++. And rest is history. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my
That's how
goodness.
we got into software development.
And you got in on a language that, of course, we now know in retrospect has so many issues. And yet, I mean, it was such a hybrid. It was such a list of compromises, especially back then.
Oh,
And that was your
fantastic.
introduction.
Totally. And so here is my assessment of C++. You take a curve, you don't know C++.
Uh-huh.
You know C++. You spend a bit more time with it, you don't know C++. Because the more you work with it, the more you realize you can never master that language. One complexity leads to more complexity.
Ah,
That's the way the language is structured. I offered the course for 14 years,
wow, did you?
and I wrote production code in C++, and that was my day job, writing code in C++. The reason I got hired was when I went to Halliburton for the interview.
Mm.
The guy who hired me, who was my supervisor,
Ah,
realized that I teach C++, and he's like, if you can teach C++, you should be able to do what we do here. And so they threw problems at me, and I was like, this is what I do every day, bring it on. So it was a perfect match for what I was teaching to what I was going to do for production. And so I jumped on, and we did really fun stuff with C++ back then.
now I have to make a comment on the analogy, that the one that goes with the curve there. I usually make that same analogy when I'm telling people about multi-threaded coding,
Oh
is
yeah.
that you get the beginners who go, I don't even want to touch anything multi-threaded. And then they learn about, wait and notify all. And if you're lucky, they learn about an executor service and some of these things and a synchronized block. And they start to think, maybe I could do this. And then you talk to experts like, you don't want to be involved. You really don't want to do this at all.
So I got to, if you don't mind me taking on a tangent,
Please.
I do want to say something else that absolutely I'm almost in tears when I say this. So back in time,
Yeah.
when I was programming in C++, you want to become an expert in C++, right? I was teaching it, I was programming in it. So
Uh-huh.
I would buy all these books on C++.
Right.
And one such book, and people may or may not know this, is called Effective C++.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's
So,
Scott Meyer, right?
bingo.
Yeah.
So Scott Meyer's book, right? So this is a Bible. I am reading Scott Meyer's book every day, right? Every day. This is like, I'm coding something, go back to Scott Meyer's book.
Yeah. It was a really good book, as I remember.
Was very good book. In
Yeah.
fact, you know how important this is when your family knows the authors of the book you read. So my wife knows of Scott Meyer because I keep mentioning the name. Fast forward 20 years. I'm in Poland, and the following week I'm in Riga in Latvia. So I'm in Poland. The conference says, we're sending you a taxi, get in and come to the conference. I literally open the door and I sit in and lock the door and I turn around and there's Scott Myers. And I looked at Scott. I don't think Scott knows who I am. I look at Scott and said, Scott. He's like, yeah. He's like, you don't understand the gravity of the situation. I grew up reading your book. I mean, I'm like shaking at this point. I cannot believe I am sitting in a car with Scott Myers. What do? I called my wife.
Ah,
I said, I am in the car with Scott Myers. She didn't ask me who Scott Myers is. She's like, oh my gosh, I know what this means to you. And the following week, I'm in Riga, and Scott Myers comes down and says, what are you doing for dinner? I'm like, what do you have in mind? He's like, let's go. So I go have dinner with them,
Scott Meyer. Yes.
and then we are walking on the beach talking about software development. And I was like, I'm done.
If this story ends up with you having breakfast with Scott Myers, I'm going to start to get worried. But okay.
I was blown away at this amazing event. If you asked me back in time, I would ever meet Scott Myers and have dinner with him and walk the beach of Riga with him, I would have said, you're crazy. That to me was like mind blown. So experiences, I would say, things that you get to enjoy in life, you never know what's
Well,
going to show up.
they say never meet your heroes, but this one worked out really, really well. So that's excellent. Yeah, that's right. There's a comment here about like when Sheldon got Leonard Nimoy's napkin and on Big Bang Theory. Oh, well, that's wonderful. That's a great story. I mean, I never had anything like that, although I do. I had two minor comparisons to that. One is at a Spring One 2GX conference, I had to give a presentation on, I think I even called it something ridiculous like advanced groovy, like I know advanced groovy, something on groovy programming for advanced development, and in should walk Paul King to sit in the back of the room. And I'm like, now, if you don't know, Paul King is effectively the head of the groovy framework. I mean, he knows everything about everything on that. And I'm sitting here going, I'm going to talk in front of Paul King about specialized techniques in groovy. And I'm still surprised I didn't just immediately freeze up and not do anything. But I mean, I gave my talk. He came up afterwards and he was his normal charming self and said, very good. But did you know? Bang, 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 bang. You could simplify this. You could simplify that. This is this. That's that. It was a lot of fun. The only other one is when I was not quite on the No Fluff tour yet. I was still attending on my own dime, and I went to one of the shows in the Boston area. I think it was in Framingham, and I think Neil Ford was giving the keynote, and in should walk Martin Fowler. And of course, I'd read now the one book that he likes to pretend he never wrote because he hated was UML Distilled, which was everybody's UML book back at the time, And I'm like, that's freaking Martin Fowler. And after that was over, they did what they often did on the tour. And I don't remember if you were there or not. They went down into the basement to play those Euro games or whatever they're going to do. And I'm sitting here playing Euro games with Martin Fowler. It was just incredible to me. Although my biggest memory of that is I wanted to introduce myself and to say hi. And I did what I used to do at the time. I was going to hand him one of my cards. And his response was, well, I'll take it, but you don't really want me to because I'm just going to throw it away. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, he's a real nice guy, but he never took business cards apparently. But yeah, I mean, amazing stuff like that. It's and yours was a complete coincidence. I mean, it's amazing. You just happened to be in the same cab
Yeah.
right there. Did he sign any books for you or do anything like that?
I didn't have any books to ask
Yeah,
him to sign.
right,
He
right.
had just written, I think, has updated the effective C++
Yeah,
to, I'm forgetting, C++ 17 or something like
yeah,
that.
I don't remember anymore.
And he was pretty much towards retirement at the time. So I would be surprised if he's not retired already.
So when did you leave Halliburton then?
Oh, 96, I think,
So where'd you
something
go
like that.
next?
I went to a company called Simulation Sciences. So
Oh,
they created simulators for chemical engineering, and another humbling experience. So the people that I worked with were PhDs in chemical engineering.
right.
I cut classes when it was chemistry related, right? I couldn't handle that. I remember this weird experience. I would go to a guy and I would say, I'm looking at this textbook. I think it's your dad's name is on it. And he's like, no, that's my name. So these guys wrote the algorithms that define chemical engineering. It's just mind blowing when you look at these kinds of people. So they were the people who wrote the algorithms for how chemical and properties behaved. I'm novice. I don't have a clue what these things mean. They would talk about hydrocarbons and how these things behave. I could barely understand what they were doing, but my job was to write the code for it.
Well, what
Uh,
attracted you to the job if you weren't interested in chemical engineering at all?
architecture. So they were creating, but of course I have to know enough chemical engineering to be dangerous. But they were architecting systems for creating simulators. These were high performance simulators.
Mhm.
So performance was extremely important. But I think I misspoke a little bit. But when I was working for Halliburton, this is another story. I got a call at the university, and somebody randomly called and said, "We want somebody to come and teach C++."
Ah,
And the department assistant looked at the word C++. Oh, there's a dude who teaches C++ who's part time here. So put a note in my mailbox and said, call this person. So a couple of weeks goes by. I look at this note, and somebody from Raytheon has left a message saying we need somebody to come and teach C++. So I called this person and I said, "Hey, just want to be upfront with you. I'm not a faculty. I'm a part-time teacher. I teach in the evenings. I work full-time as a software developer for your competitor. Just want you to know, if you want to hang up right now for these two reasons, that I'm not a full-time teacher and I work for a competitor, I won't be offended. We can hang up right now." He's like, "No, no, no, this only got better.
oh
It's better
yeah,
than what I expected.
I'm
So
sure they
let's
love
talk."
both of those.
So they said, "This means that you're going to bring practical experience. Can you come and teach
Right.
for us?" So this was back in time. They were getting out of their office at 4 p.m. on Mondays for whatever reason. So the department head decided to make the employees wait for 2 more hours on Mondays. So they would stay behind 4 to 6 p.m. on Monday. And my job was to go down and teach C++ for
Oh,
2 hours a day for 10 weeks.
oh my goodness.
So I went to my boss and I said, "Boss, I've got a problem.
Yeah,
Your competitor wants me to teach for them.
right.
What do you think?" And my boss is like, "Gosh, if you don't talk about this to anybody, I don't have a problem with it."
Oh my goodness.
And so my deal was I would leave work at 2:30 p.m. on Mondays,
Uh-huh.
drive across town, teach 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. for 10 weeks. And so this was with Raytheon. So Simulation Sciences eventually bought the division. So then into about the so another life's events unbelievable. So if anybody is in from Houston, they will know this. There's a Pierce elevated. So basically, you have a freeway that goes up, on the top,
Hmm.
and you are on the freeway until you can get down for, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles. So there's no way you can get off the freeway because you are at what, 40, 50 feet up the
Oh,
above the ground.
okay.
So 2:30, first day, and remember this is before the time of cell phones, right? No cell phones.
Right.
So I get on the freeway 2:30, and I'm on the freeway at about 3 p.m. My class starts at 4. I'm on that same freeway, stuck over there until 4:30.
Oh no.
And I am like, my gosh, this is the first day of a class that I'm ever teaching in the industry.
Yeah.
And I drive in literally at 5 p.m., 1 hour late.
My goodness.
When I drive in, the director who hired me, red faced, was outside on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And as I drove in, I can see he is angry. I went to him and said, I'm sorry. He said, don't talk to me. And he just walked in, and I followed him. I walk into a room full of developers thinking, who's this moron who is an hour late for a class?
Mm-hmm.
I put my stuff down and I said, I am not going to give you excuses. It doesn't matter why I'm late, but I'm late and I'm sorry. I'm here to teach. I'm getting started. So I went for an hour. So remember, I was supposed to teach 4 to 6.
Mm.
So I finished an hour and I paused and said, folks, that's my hour of teaching. We were supposed to go for 2 hours. Clearly, I was late by an hour. So this is where I am. And one of the guys said, so why are you stopping? And I said, oh, is everybody okay with it? And they just did this. And I kept going for an hour. 7 p.m. I finished. I said, that's for the day. And if you will let me in the building, I'll be here next week. And they didn't leave. They were still sitting.
Wow.
And I said, I'm done. Any questions? And they started asking more questions.
Mm-hmm.
We're there till 7:30 in the night. And then they said, cool, we'll see you next week. And everybody walked out. And the manager was still sitting there, the director rather. I
Mm.
went to him and said, I want to say sorry again. He said, for what? You just created more problem for me. Now I have to find how to keep the other people in the company not getting into this class.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it, I'll see you next week. And that's how it started. And 4 weeks went by, and they came back to me and said, we got to talk to you. We are happy with this course, but we all decided, collectively that we want to hire you. Why don't you come work for us? So that's how I went to work for Raytheon from Halliburton.
So
And
how?
of course, once I joined them, I said, hey, can I teach in other companies? And my new boss said, as long as you don't talk to me about it, I don't care what
Really?
you do.
I thought they were going to come right down on that. I mean, they saw the danger. Oh
Yeah,
well.
Raytheon doesn't allow you to do any extra work.
Mm.
And so he said, if Raytheon knows about it, you're dead.
Yeah.
So let Raytheon not know about it.
And
And
you were
then that's how
still
it started.
teaching at University of Houston the whole time.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I started traveling actually. So the deal I had eventually with them is I would work for 3 weeks. I would take a week off so I can teach courses in other states in the country.
Ah.
And I worked that Saturday, Sunday, and the next Saturday, Sunday to cover up the time. So it was a journey to get that moving forward. Yeah.
I mean, for those people who are not aware, I mean, this is something you learn when you get to know Venkat at all. It's that he probably works, oh, I'm guessing conservatively 3 to 4 times as hard as anybody else, probably all the rest of us put together. So, I mean, you've earned a lot in your career, but it's easy to see why. I mean, the amount of time and effort you put into this, that when opportunities came your way, you were there and you were ready for it and you went after it. I think it's wonderful. I got to ask you, rather than go chronologically, let me jump to this one story I know you have. Um, there was a question earlier by John Richardson saying, how do you get further into all these software languages so well that you're writing books about it? Let me ask you the related question, because I know the story I'm thinking of. I remember I was at Stu Halloway's place once, and you were there, And that was the first time I was like really new on the tour. I didn't know much of anything about anything. And someone suggested, it might have been Stu because he's a troublemaker, but he asked me to ask you how you write your books. You know, what was your process for writing a book? And I don't know if you remember this, but you probably know what I'm getting at, right? How do you? I mean, because again, the question is, how do you learn these things well? Or as Simon points out, you know, how do you learn something new and suddenly there's a new Prague book or whatever? Tell that if it's, I don't know if that process is still the same as it used to be, but how did that work out now? How does that work?
So in one of the books I quoted, and I hope I'm not misquoting here, words of Mozart. And Mozart said, the music has been written. I just need to,
The rest of it, scribbling,
write
yeah.
it down.
Uh-huh.
So to me, I would say this is one of the benefits of being on tours like No Fluff, Just Stuff. Um, no Fluff gives you this opportunity to try ideas out, to kind of push the boundaries. If I have a topic I'm really curious to explore, I can write as a talk, I can go present it. And I have this fond memory, whether it's Boston or Columbus or, in various places, when you're presenting an idea, somebody asks a question and you're able to think a little bit more critically and try to find solutions towards it. And so the answer is, how do you learn these languages? It really comes down to, and I'll come to your question after that,
Yeah.
and that is, you don't want to learn the syntax of a language. That's the least interesting, but what people get most excited about. To me, the most interesting part of a language is the semantics. And when you think of the semantics, so I'll give you an example. I'll tell you what prompted me to honestly write the Kotlin book. And you may say this is crazy, right? There was one reason I wrote the Kotlin book, and that is, in Kotlin you can take a lambda expression
Yeah.
and you can attach the lambda to a receiver,
Sure.
and then you can call the method on it.
That's how you
Honestly,
make
that
it. Oh,
that
yeah.
blew my mind. I'm like, wait, it's a statically typed language. How in the world they do that? And I sat down one day and I wanted to really understand it. Googling doesn't help because nobody talks about this. And I said to myself, wait, I know in JavaScript, you can take a function and attach a receiver to it.
Right.
So JavaScript does that. So literally, I wrote the JavaScript syntax in Kotlin and it
Okay.
worked and it worked. And I was blown away by this. And Kotlin has a much more simpler syntax for it, but the other syntax worked as well. Then I started getting deeper into it and I realized in that context, the semantics that JavaScript uses is the semantics that Kotlin uses. Syntax was not important at this point.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You wrote a book on Groovy, and Groovy used delegates for closures. You already knew about that, right?
It's a dynamic type language again, but this one is a statically typed language.
JavaScript's completely dynamically typed.
That's right. So you've seen this in dynamic type languages before. Have you seen one in statically typed language? Kotlin is the first one I saw that happen.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's why I got intrigued. It's like, I know this is possible in Groovy dynamic typing. I know this is possible in JavaScript dynamic typing. How in the world does this happen in Kotlin?
Okay.
And so I started digging in and try to find out how it's actually working. And once I saw the semantics of how it's working,
Mm.
I was convinced there's a story to tell. So essentially, you write books because you got a story to tell.
Right.
And
That
and
I'll
and
agree with. Yes.
yeah, and so when I wanted to write my very first book, I had never written a book so far.
Oh, wait.
Uh,
Before you get to that, one last thing. Uh, I have to ask, which of your Kotlin books are you referring to in that discussion?
the,
Is that
the first the programming in Kotlin.
the programming Kotlin? Because
Yeah,
more recently, you've got the Prague Express book on writing DSLs in Kotlin.
right. No, this was the first one.
Yeah, well, I just
Uh,
want people to know. Okay, now go ahead. Back to your
which in itself is surprising because that book ended up being 420 pages long. They would never let me write a book of that volume.
no.
I would have never let myself write a book of that volume. But Kotlin is such an intriguing language. There is so much to really discuss. It just blew my mind. So back in time,
Yeah,
I went to as part of No Fluff series. Bruce Tate was on the series.
right.
Bruce Tate is an amazing guy to learn from.
Yeah.
He wrote the Bitter Java book, and then the Bitter EJB book,
Oh,
and then he wrote the Better, Faster, Lighter Java, which is really about Spring,
right.
and then he wrote Beyond Java, and then he wrote Ruby for Java, Rails for Java programmers.
Oh, that's his. Okay.
So that was his kind of a transition until that point, and of course he's moved on to write other beautiful books. So Bruce is this veteran of writing books. I've never written a book.
Hmm.
I went to Bruce and I said, Bruce, I'm thinking of writing a book. What do you think? And his first question was, how's your business? Oh my gosh, my business is busy. I'm doing all this work. I hardly have any time. And he said, well, a book is a business, book size business card. You don't want to write a book if your business is doing really well, because that's not a good use of your time. You're
Oh,
busy already. Why do you want to spend more time committing to things? I'm like, thanks for the advice. That's a great advice. I won't write a book. So I dropped an idea of writing a book,
so he tried to
and
save you. He did. He tried
he
to
did. He'd
spare
say
you.
he. I wish I had listened to him honestly. And a year went by, and I realized he is right, but he's not entirely right. You write a book to gain business, which I didn't care for,
Hmm.
but you write a book because you have a story to tell.
Yeah.
And I was in Houston at the time, and I had this habit of speaking in the Java user group and the .NET user group once a year. So the .NET user group said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I was programming in C# back in time for clients, and I wanted to write about the pitfalls in C# and .NET. I mean, I wanted to talk about it. So honestly, I sent a abstract to the user group, and the title of the abstract was .NET Gotchas.
Hmm.
And I hit the return. I hear this mail go away, and I said to myself, "Wait, this would be a good book to write, wouldn't it be?" So I Googled, and there was no book on the topic.
Hmm.
And I don't even know if Google was there at the time, some search engine, and there was no book on this topic. And I'm not kidding here. I got so excited. I started writing the book then, right then. And I wrote the book in 2 weeks. And I quit doing everything else because I was just overcome by this idea. I would wake up, wee early in the morning, start hammering away. 2 weeks, I finished the book, went to O'Reilly, again, went to Bruce Tate. Bruce, can you help me? I need a publisher. Oh, let me put you in touch with somebody in O'Reilly. So
Hmm.
Bruce is the one who connected the dots, so to
Okay.
say. And so now I'm talking to O'Reilly. They said, oh, send us a proposal. So I send them a proposal. A month or two goes by. And I remember this editor called me and said, I was on the phone. He said, congratulations, your book has been accepted for publication. We want to talk about the timeline. When can you write the book and
Oh
send it
my
to
God.
us? And I said, I can send it to you right now.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, so no, don't worry about it. Your book is accepted. You don't have to send me anything now. When can you send the book? I can send it to you now. He said, okay, clearly we are miscommunicating. This is not working. The proposal, it's done. Don't
Uh-huh.
worry about it. We're talking about the book.
Hmm.
I said, can I ask you a favor? It's like, what is it? Can you just hang on for a second? Sure. And I emailed him the book.
Right.
I said, could you please check your email? They're like, what's in it? Just check it. He looks at the email and he says, oh, I didn't expect this. I said, did I do something wrong? He said, no, you should submit a proposal and then we should nag you for 2 years
Hmm.
for you to write a book. You
Right.
don't write a book and come to a publisher. I'm like, oops, I'm sorry. Little did I know. And I figured that's a great way to write the book. And almost every book, not all of them, but almost every book I've written over a 2 week period. Usually, week of Thanksgiving is amazing. You
That-
get, lock yourselves and write it in 2 weeks and you're done.
yeah, that's the way I heard the story slightly more dramatically. I mean, same idea, but the way the story was told to me is that during that 2 week period, you get up at 4 in the morning
I do.
and you write until 10 p.m.,
That's right.
taking as few limited breaks as possible. Your family will leave food outside your door, stuff that
That's
sort of
right.
thing.
That's true.
You do this every
And I
freaking
grow
day
my beard.
for 2 weeks, and then you have a draft of a 350 page book at the end of that. Now, first thing I got to say about that, as an author, I say this in all honesty, that's impossible. Okay, I'm sorry. That's not physically possible. Nobody can do that. Okay, except you. So, but you decided you like this process and you do this a lot. You do this every year kind of
Yeah,
thing,
I would
right?
say about 13 out of the 14 books have been written that way. 13 out of the 15 books. Yeah, and it's great because, and in all fairness, right, it's a first draft. It's not a, what you see published is very different from what's written in the
I
first draft.
I don't care. I know what you're saying, and I understand that that rough draft is extremely rough, but that many hours of intense concentration on one topic, doing the whole thing, I couldn't even dream of doing that. I mean, I would love to do it, and I'll bet. And your wife, who I think we both will acknowledge, is a complete saint, by the way, right?
She's very supportive, beyond
Let
beyond
this
being
happen.
supportive.
Yeah, she's okay with it as well. Um, by the way, this brings up a related question. Simon was asking here what the future book plans might be, especially now. You just let's give people a clue here. You recently updated your functional programming in Java book, and I already mentioned the DSLs in Kotlin. Have there been any others I'm not thinking of right now?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So so
what's the cruising in Java, right? That one or
right, right. So that one, I
which
I
one?
wrote it in 2 weeks as well. So a little story about it. So you said my wife is a saint. Well, maybe not as saint as you would wish her to be.
Oh, really?
So I was on a hike.
Now
I'll,
she
I'll
might
tell,
watch this, be careful.
I'll tell you, I was on a hike with her,
Ah,
just the two of us, hiking the mountains. And on the hike, this was, late August. No, it was mid-August. And I tell her, hey, Java 1 is coming up in October. And she's like, uh-huh. And I said, it'd be great to write a book on Java, 9 to, 20 or 19, whatever.
uh-huh.
And she's like, yeah, that'd be a good book to write. And then a few minutes goes by, and then she says, hey, don't you think if you can write it now? I mean, remember, this is mid-August, right? Don't you think if you can write it now, you can actually release it during Java 1? And I look at her and said, you realize there is 8 weeks between now and Java 1.
Yeah.
And she's like, that long?
Well, she
And
gotta get
I'm like,
revenge somehow. Yeah, I get that.
and I'm like, okay, it is a deal. So I come home and I start writing the book.
Yeah.
And I called the Prac Prague and I said, I'm really interested in writing a book, but unfortunately, I'm going to place a request, very strong request. We got to go through this really fast because we got 8 weeks. It's got to go through tech review
Uh-huh.
and then into beta release by October 19th. And they emailed, Jackie is an amazing person, Jackie Carter. They emailed her and said, Jackie, what do you think? And Jackie's like, well, Venkat is going to write it. I'm ready. I'll clear my calendar. So we were on a roll through it. And I wrote my first draft 2 weeks. Now, not the entire book because I wanted to delay part of the book, but still significant chapters. I don't remember now, but maybe 7 or 8 chapters.
Mm.
And in fact, 7 chapters, I think. And we got through the tech review. She worked really hard to edit it, and my English is not the best, so she works with me a lot to make it better. And then we release it on October 19th.
Wow.
So that was a mission accomplished. But I wanted that book to cover up to Java virtual threads. So that's why we delayed it. So we
Uh,
went to beta with everything in Java prior to Java 20 except modules, and then we are adding modules now. And I really want to wait for another 3 or 4 months to see how virtual threads are doing, and then wrap up with 2 chapters on virtual threads. So that will be the next book, the Cruising Along with Java, currently in beta.
so those are at least virtual threads are stable at this point. At least you don't have to worry about
Yeah,
the whole API changing again, like you
right.
would have had to worry about a year ago. My goodness.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
wow. So she basically sentenced you to write that book. You know? Oh my goodness. All right. So so I guess you kind of answered what's next is to polish off the rest of that book. But I mean, when's the last time you were only working on one thing at a time anyway? So I assume you're already thinking about what's coming next after that.
There are a couple of things, but nothing really that I'm really decided yet.
Okay.
So I got maybe one more technical book I'm interested in writing, and maybe after that, I don't know. We'll see what comes up after that.
All right. Well, then let me ask you a more general question, just to get an idea here. Um, the biggest thing, of course, that's hit our industry in years, of course, are these major AI tools. Things not just GitHub Copilot, but the Chat GPT and Bard and Claude and all that, and many related tools as well. How do you see that affecting what we're doing in the future? How do you see that affecting us, yourself directly and the industry as a whole?
I'll share two experiences with you related to that,
Great.
to kind of say what my opinion about it is.
Mm,
I was teaching a course I was teaching a course for a company in New York about 4 or 5 weeks ago,
mhm.
and I had given a set of labs for the developers to work on, and one of the labs I had given, the developer decided to take the problem and key it into AI, and see what it says.
Ah,
And as I was walking by the room as they're working on the lab, he kind of chuckled and said, "I'm going to let AI solve your problem." I said, "That's great. Let's see what it does." So he posed the problem. It gave three solutions. One was, yeah, that's one way to solve it, but not exciting. But one of the solutions literally nailed it. And I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Then the next problem we fed in, and the result was terrible.
yeah.
And not only I could see it, but he was able to see it. Like, oh, that's really a bummer. Never mind. He throws it away and starts solving himself. But a second experience, which really blew my mind, is I was speaking in Columbus, and I was doing this talk on refactoring from imperative to functional style.
Okay.
And a lady in the room said, "Hey, you're refactoring all this code. How would AI solve this problem?" And I said, think of an AI as the most wicked, fast copy paster,
Yeah.
and it's going to give you a lot of things, but you need to know whether it is sensible or not.
Right.
She went on. The next morning, I get an email from her, and she said, "I took every one of your examples, I keyed them as a prompt into AI,
Hmm.
and here's the result of it. There you go." And she sent me the code for the entire session. So I was like curious, right? Maybe I don't need to give any more talks. So, so I looked at my first problem. It nailed it.
Ah,
The solution was almost the same as what I had written. I would even say it did a bit more optimization than I did. So if I stopped there, I would have said, "I'm done. I don't need to do this anymore. I can retire." Then I said, "Let me look at the next problem."
right.
The next problem, the input, it took the input, solved the problem, and her prompt was to give a bigger value for the input. But the AI was not smart enough to realize this will eventually be an overflow.
Oh, okay.
It was suggesting the input be a long rather than the output being a big integer. Imagine somebody who is not thinking, oh,
Mm.
by the way, this is the first problem I give to my students,
Oh.
and wait for them to discover overflow.
Ah.
And they run into overflow and they're like, oh my gosh, my code is failing. What am I doing wrong? And they're like, oh, I should use a big integer.
Mm.
AI never got to that point after
Right.
prompting several times.
Because it doesn't understand any of that.
It didn't
It's
really have the
not
context of it.
yeah, right, right.
Then the third solution, I'm not even kidding with you, I eyeballed the code and I said to myself, this would never work. But below the code is a text that tells you, if you give this input, here's the output. I'm like, you're lying.
Yeah.
And I literally copied that code and pasted it,
Uh-huh.
and it failed with the error I expected.
Right, right.
The output was nowhere close to what the output was that it produced from the description. So there you go. It really comes down to asking, what does this really mean to us? It's a great tool. There is no doubt about it. But here's a crude analogy I'll give for that. We all use maps, no doubt about it. You wouldn't go anywhere without a map. There was a day, and do I use maps? Of course. I travel around the world with Google Maps and Apple Maps. But there was a day I was in Tennessee.
Mm.
I was driving, and Google Map literally said, take left.
Uh-oh.
And I said, no. And I went straight. It said, take a U-turn. So I did. Now it said, take a right turn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, are you kidding? I went further. It said, take a U and take a left turn. It wanted me to turn on a railway track.
Oh my.
That is AI to me. Am I going to use a map? Yes. Am I going to turn onto a railway track? Heck no. I need to have my sense. So it's a tool, but I still need to know what the context is. And that's what I'm doing. As an example, I had my son visit a couple of weeks ago, and I'm watching out what I'm eating, going through some health problems, and we ordered some food. And my question to him was, hey, what's in this food? How many calories exist? What's a carb in it? And he's like, Dad, let me show you. Literally, he takes the bowl of food that we ordered, takes a photo, pushes
Right.
it, and I
Mm-hmm.
got a calorie count.
Oh my.
That is amazing. Well, am I going to accept the data? No, I'm verifying. Does this
Right.
make sense? Is it coming close? There are things it didn't identify that are not fully visible, but it still gets me somewhere, right? So it's a good tool to get you. So here's my take on it. Use AI for ideas, not for solutions.
Mm.
It's great for ideas. Oh, I didn't think of that. Let me explore further.
Mm.
But if I'm an idiot who takes solutions from it, I deserve to have the results it produces. So I want AI for ideas, not for solutions.
Very interesting. We'll have to talk more about that. Just a couple things. First of all, I don't want to open up a whole topic here, but I do want to address Vincent's comment here. This is a very common criticism these days about the fact that the major AI tools these days were trained on an internet that was largely populated by human content, I should say. And of course, now so many people are using AI tools that they're flooding the internet with bad content generated by AI. So that the next generation of AI tools is basically being trained on, to put it kind of bluntly, on their own waste in a way, and that the collapse of that is almost inevitable. Now, how that's going to work out, I mean, my opinion is nobody has any idea how this is going to happen. We don't know yet. I mean, it can't be good, but we don't know how that'll play. I just don't want to open up a whole can of worms now to go down that path.
I'll just say one thing.
Yeah,
You
please.
made me think about it. This reminds me of JavaScript programmers who learned JavaScript from code on the web.
Right.
So the results are very similar.
We always used to do that, right? I mean, in the early days, you do a view source on a website that you thought, hey, that looks cool. How'd they do it? And that's how you'd learn HTML and a little bit of CSS and lots of JavaScript that way. And some of that JavaScript was just awful. Yeah, absolutely horrendous code. And that means that this will be propagating more bad code. Yeah, all around. But that's what in my opinion, actually, that's what books are for now. What they used to be for was to be exhaustive references and really explaining things. Now they are as much filtering as anything else. They're as much saying, look, I took the time to make a prioritized list of what you really need to know, as opposed to all this garbage out there. And here are the topics, here are the concepts, here's the basics. Now you can go and do what you need. But again, my own opinion. Let me ask you this, because we're kind of wrapping up anything. Is there anything you want to mention about where you're going to be going or what you're going to be writing, or anything you want to talk about now, just as
So one thing I try to do is, anytime I travel to a city for a conference or work,
Yeah.
I really like to go to user groups,
Yes.
and if you don't mind going back to my website, on the conferences page, I have a list of user groups that I'm visiting. If anyone is nearby, I would be delighted to meet during those user groups. And that's one thing I try to do very often, is to and there's a conferences about right in the middle. One
There
more,
it
there
is.
you go.
There you go.
And if you scroll down a little bit to bottom of this page, is where I have the user groups yeah, right there you go. So that's basically my user group for the next few weeks, or few months rather. So if there's a user group nearby, and I probably have a couple of more to add in here along the way. Um, but that's what I try to do, is to go to user groups anytime I'm able to. And so come, I request people to come to user groups, but whether I'm there or not, be part of the user groups. I think that's something we need to really be promoting the community. And that's one of the reasons I try to speak in about 20 to 25 user groups every year. And I
Well,
want to continue doing that as well.
that's one story we got to mention before we exit, though. Wasn't it a couple of years ago you decided to do, how many user groups was it in a year? What did you do
Yeah.
that?
Well, I turned 50,
Right.
so I wanted to speak in 50 user groups in that year,
Right.
but ended up speaking in 52 user groups.
Because of course you did.
And then and the highlight of it was the Paris Java user group was celebrating their 10th anniversary.
Ah,
And so I gave a talk on the top of Eiffel Tower. And to me, that was the highlight of this whole thing. So speaking in Eiffel Tower just blew my mind.
so I guess all that's left is we're going to have to see if they do have, in fact, a user group at McMurdo Station in Antarctica.
I think we should do it. Well, tell you what, you and I will pair up and give a talk over there.
Yeah, it works for me. You know, you can be the debut speaker, and I'll hold your coat. You know, I'll back you up. Well, I really appreciate your taking the time to be here. It's very kind of you. I'm really glad that you got to be here. Oh, by the way, Vincent says Paris is magic. Yes. And I'm sure
Absolutely.
you would agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. And I don't know when our paths will intersect again, probably at one of the No Fluff events in the fall. And if you really are coming to Connecticut, be sure to send me a note,
Will do.
because I don't want to travel like that anymore. So, but I will just say thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure having you here. And, hopefully we'll get together again soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ken, and thanks for everyone, Simon, everyone participating. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. You made my day. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.